Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly profound, honestly paradigm-shifting text written by philosopher Abu Yarub al-Marzuki back in 2004. We're going to completely reframe how we look at one of the absolute largest human gatherings on the planet, the pilgrimage of Hajj. Al-Marzuki argues that we've really barely scratched the surface of what this massive event is truly meant to be. He's presenting a full-blown philosophical awakening, basically arguing that Hajj is designed by its very nature to be the ultimate cultural and civilizational summit for humanity. It is a fascinating read, and I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through his insights today.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at moving beyond just rituals and economics. Second, we'll dive into the 5 civilizational values. Third, the renewed Abrahamic tradition. Fourth, what these cultural benefits look like in practice. And finally, number 5, scaling all of this up to a global civilizational awakening. Let's jump right in.
All right, Section 1, Beyond Rituals and Economics. Now, to kick off this massive somatic expansion, Al-Marzuki says we first have to kind of unlearn our tendency to put Hajj into this neat, tiny little box. So I really want you to think about this foundational question for a second. When literally millions of people gather in Mecca, is it simply a personal religious obligation? Like, is it just individuals checking off a spiritual requirement on their to-do list? Or, on the flip side, is it merely an annual economic market? Just a hub for financial commerce and seasonal tourism? Al-Marzuki really challenges us to look way past these preconceived notions. Because if we limit Hajj to just a short-term personal ritual or, a seasonal bazaar, we completely miss its grand civilizational design. And this contrast perfectly captures the author's transformative thesis. On one hand, you have the narrow view, right? The one that completely separates the spiritual from the material. But then, Al-Marzuki introduces his civilizational view. He argues that in the Islamic tradition, there's literally no artificial separation between the worldly and the otherworldly. The worldly aspects, the economics, the complex logistics, the social networking, those are the tools. The otherworldly aspects are the ultimate goals. So Hajj is meant to be this permanent mechanism, bridging the two together, essentially turning every single material action into a profound spiritual reality. Moving right along to Section 2, the 5 civilizational values. Because now that we've zoomed out, we really need to unpack the exact components that build a thriving civilization, at least according to Al-Marzuki's reading of the Quran. Now, a huge piece of this puzzle is how we define the word culture. In Arabic, the word is thaqafa. And Al-Marzuki makes this brilliant point that the linguistic root of this word doesn't just mean, traditional arts, crafts, or local food. It actually means realization, control, and the deep-seated capability to act purposefully. It's really about intellectual and practical power. Culture, in this specific framework, is basically the essential survival toolkit required for any civilization to adapt and thrive. So, what exactly is inside this cultural toolkit? Well, the author extracts 5 core civilizational values from the Quran that literally cover every single aspect of human existence. First up, taste, so that's your arts and aesthetics. Second is sustenance, which covers economics and the management of wealth. Third, theory, the hard sciences and intellectual pursuits. Fourth is practice, so politics, society, and real-world action. And finally, existence, religion, and the ultimate meaning of life itself. Al-Marzuki's big argument here is that Hajj is uniquely engineered to be this annual global symposium where all 5 of these values are actively cultivated and shared among millions. Which brings us to Section 3, the renewed Abrahamic tradition. To really grasp why Hajj has this immense civilizational purpose, we have to dig into the specific historical and theological roots of Abraham. Al-Marzuki uses this highly specific, frankly fascinating term here, the renewed Abrahamic tradition, or Hanifiyya Muhaddisa. He describes the Islamic message not just as, a museum piece preserving ancient history, but as a dynamic return to original pure monotheism that's combined with constant intellectual renewal. It's this beautiful, crucial balance. You're rooting yourself deeply in an ancient, unshakable truth, but you also possess this built-in mechanism for constant modernization and cultural evolution. Think about it almost like a matrix that perfectly structures Al-Marzuki's complex thoughts on how Muslims are meant to strive within this tradition. It's like a dual-engine system. On one side, we have ijtihad, which sits entirely in the domain of the intellect. Its primary tool is free reason, and its ultimate goal, seeking truth. On the other side, we have jihad, which sits in the domain of will and practice. Its tool is free action, and its goal is implementing justice.
Working together, these two concepts form the absolute intellectual and practical engines of a working civilization.
And to back up this idea that the tradition is meant to be a pulsating, living force, the author points straight to the Quranic concept of aktasa. As the quote perfectly captures, God brings about a new remembrance. It implies a dynamic, ongoing creation. It's kind of like a continuous software update for humanity. The tradition is inherently designed to be constantly renewing the human spirit and intellect to face whatever modern challenges come its way. It was literally never meant to be stagnant. All right, moving into Section 4, Cultural Benefits in Practice. We've spent some time up in the clouds with a high-level philosophy, but what does this actually look like when millions of people physically bump shoulders in Mecca?
While the author draws a really sharp line between what currently happens and what absolutely should happen. Right now, what we're mostly seeing are spontaneous benefits. People naturally mingle, they share food, they notice different traditional clothes from around the world. It's a very natural, almost passive cultural exchange. But Al-Marzuki envisions something way bigger, intentional benefits. He argues Hajj should be this highly organized, intensely planned intellectual exchange featuring massive global symposiums, vast translation efforts, and showcases of world-class arts and sciences. I mean, just try to wrap your head around the sheer scale of this intentional exchange. You've got over 2 million pilgrims flying in from upwards of 180 different countries. The linguistic diversity alone is absolutely staggering. You've got Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Urdu, Malay, Swahili, plus a multitude of European languages. He paints this vivid picture where Hajj acts as the world's greatest translation hub. Just imagine the scientific exchange, the sharing of breakthrough literature, and the cross-pollination of ideas happening simultaneously across dozens of languages.
And that perfectly sets up our final section. Number 5, a global civilizational awakening. Let's see how all these pieces scale up to the ultimate global impact of treating Hajj as a comprehensive summit.
To understand the real urgency of this awakening, we have to look at the global context that Al-Marzuki is responding to. The author identifies what he sees as the primary ideological threats of our modern era: global secularism and social Darwinism. He critiques these specific ideologies for essentially reducing the profound human experience down to mere evolutionary struggles, a blind survival of the fittest. And in his framework, it's exactly this existential global crisis that the gathering of Hajj is meant to mobilize humanity against.
So, how exactly does the Islamic world use Hajj to transition from playing defense to actually becoming a guiding force? Well, Al-Marzuki lays out 3 clear, sequential steps. Step 1, achieve symbolic unity through a shared spiritual awakening at the pilgrimage itself. Step 2, take that unity and leverage it to build material independence, meaning fostering very real economic and cultural power among all those diverse nations present. And finally, Step 3, act as a witness to humanity. By nailing the first 2 steps, the civilization can step up to guide global discourse away from mere survival and toward much higher moral and spiritual values. Which brings us to our final provocative thought, something I really want you to kind of chew on after we wrap up here. If Al-Marzuki's massive vision is actually realized, if Hajj is systematically transformed from just a routine personal ritual into the world's absolute greatest cultural, intellectual, and economic summit, how will that alter the future trajectory of human civilization? It is just a breathtaking scale of thought, right? It really goes to show that sometimes the most ancient traditions hold the ultimate keys to our global future. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning and keep learning.